Hi everyone, my name is Katie. I am going to be talking to you guys today about planning inquiry-based learning in the classroom. I'm also going to include my reflection in here just because I know it wasn't working in Go React, so just want to let you know. If I start sweating profusely, I apologize. This is a very warm school that I work in, and it is with no AC. So bear with me, please. All right. So, what is inquiry-based learning? Inquiry-based learning is a student-centered approach, and it's learning driven by questions, investigation, and discovery. And it's something that I think that a lot of people don't quite understand, because a lot of people just think teachers with inquiry-based learning just kind of let their kids do whatever they want, but that's not the case. It's structured in a way that allows students to ask questions, be curious, and explore their environment. And so instead of a teacher standing up at the front of the room like a traditional classroom would and lecture, they instead are a facilitator. And so that's something that we want to look at as well. And so it's something that you're guiding them. So traditional learning, again, you're kind of standing in front of a screen, looking at to kids saying, hey, I would like you to memorize this. I would like for you to all understand what I'm saying all in one fell swoop. Versus IBL is more student driven. So it's a lot easier, I think, also to modify in IBL because you can, if a student's struggling with something like reading or something like writing, you have the ability to be able to adjust that to what they need to help them learn best. And it focuses on those questions and then thinking about the different problems and how we can solve them, and really emphasizes that critical thinking. And why do we want to use it? Well, again, like I literally just said, it builds critical thinking. And critical thinking, a lot of people get really nervous around the term critical for some reason because they think it means critical race theory. I don't know why that is, but critical thinking, by definition, is you are asking a question like, hey, why do we think it's windy outside today? Because in Minnesota, it's very windy out because the last few days have been like 85, 86 degrees. And so I actually asked my students that today. I was like, why do we think it's windy outside today? Now, I explained it to them because they're not totally, my kids are pretty low functioning, but I still prompted them with this question: why is it windy? And then all of a sudden it gets really cold. It's because there's a storm that moves in, and that's the way that those weather patterns work, and so asking them these questions and having them trying to guess that response and using what they know, their prior knowledge, and using that knowledge, all of that is critical thinking. It's them trying to figure it out without help, like encouraging problem solving, and it also helps collaboration. If a kid doesn't know, go ask somebody else that might, and that again is promoting independence. And then engagement and motivation. There is nothing more engaging than a student's brain. If you are in front of the room and you are lecturing them, and you're trying to get them to memorize something, they're not thinking about anything. Unless they're very well behaved, which is very rare, especially in my school. So what y'all got to do is we have to say, okay, let's, instead of standing up in the front of the room saying said, because that's my lesson today, my sight word was said. So instead of that, we say, if somebody is talking, what is the word we use? So that gets that prompt, that vocabulary, that kind of thing. And so you asking them questions is making them engage, versus you talking at them will not make them engaged. And also, like I said, it encourages student voice and choice, and it leads to a deeper understanding. If they think of it themselves, higher retention rate, for sure. And then inclusive classrooms. This is a great way to support diverse learning needs. And also, like I said, like differentiation within different classrooms. You have the ability to be able to encourage multiple ways to learn by giving those differentiated products to different students based on what they need, right? And again, we're promoting that collaboration among peers. We said that already. And then it allows differentiation. I already said that. All right. So my selected topic and standard. So we're looking at the water cycle, okay? Because the water cycle is also something that I did in my field experience. So we're looking at third grade in the water cycle. I learned about the water cycle in fourth grade, but they're pushing kids a lot more now. So the standard for NGSS is represent data in tables and graphical displays to describe typical weather conditions expected during a particular season. And so with this, I would also teach them a song too, because I'm a big singer. And so our guiding question is, how does water move through the environment? And I know that this was the question that was in the discussion, but honestly, because it tied so well to what I had already been learning about, I thought this was a good question to do. But it's an open-ended question. And an open-ended question is like a hypothetical, right? It's like, what if? How does it do that? How do we do that? So then you have the ability to really get hands-on with kids, especially with this. I mean, you can talk about erosion and soil with this. You can talk about how different water gets picked up from different places and how it might taste. It's a very, very cool way to talk with kids about this. And it encourages, like I said, that investigation. They are thinking about it. That's important. And then what we want to do when we plan for inquiry, ask a question. Ask lots of questions, actually. Asking lots of questions is something that we definitely want to do all the time, as long as kids are motivated and engaged. Because here's the thing. I talk really fast. So something that I struggle with as a teacher is when I give a lesson, I oftentimes don't wait long enough. And I think that that's something that teachers need to understand and recognize is this type of learning and this type of teaching specifically, it really requires you to slow down, because in order for kids to grasp it, they need to process and they need to think about it. And so, like I said, like this is that ask, we investigate, we look things up, we create things, we discuss things, and then we reflect. And that's kind of that whole inquiry-based learning process. And then the water cycle activity, water in a bag, easy peasy. You get a gallon Ziploc bag. You pour some water in it. And there's different ways you can do this too. Like if it were me and it was my third grade classroom, I would do a whole like erosion project too, where I would have like the water fall down, like precipitation, because the water cycle in a bag, it's only got one or two of those of the parts of the water cycle, right? So if you put something in a bag or you put water in a bag, you put it on the windowsill and it heats up. What's going to happen? Evaporation. So all the water is going to not all the water, but a lot of the water is going to evaporate and it's going to stick to the sides of the bag and create condensation, right? So that's two different ways, or that's one way you can show kids. The other way that I like as well as an inquiry activity is by showing them how rain moves, okay? And just because erosion and with how water moves within the soil, it doesn't necessarily just have to be related to the water cycle. And I think that that's really important for inquiry-based learning too, because in reality, what you want is you want those kids to be like, okay, what next? What next? Because once that rain gets to the ground, does it just automatically go up in the air again? Well, no, it has to go through different rivers, maybe it has to go underneath the water or underneath the soil. And then if it's under the soil and it's considered groundwater, does it evaporate then? So there's all these different questions that you can talk to your kids about and ask. And then accessibility inclusion. All my students have AACs. AACs are a device that students use to help talk and communicate when they're nonverbal. And then obviously the hands-on learning. I have never, and I was a high school agriculture teacher for 3 years, so science is kind of like my thing, and I have a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Education, and science is one of my great joys because it's all about discovery, right? And so if you want to show your kids that having a small like bean and you put it in water and the bean like expands because it's soaked up water, that I can do with my kids. Because they're like, where'd the water go? And that's easy. My kids can say, it went in the bean. You know? So you can, I don't want to say dumb down, but you can like make it a little bit less complicated for them to help understand. And then like flexible grouping. And then you can also use sentence stems. That's also a really good one for EL learners. You know, I thought today, or the water cycle is about something like that. And then assistive technology, like I said, with those AACs. So formative assessment number 1, think, pair, share. Easiest formative assessment ever. You can also do turn and talk, but I like think, pair, share. It's just a little bit more structured versus turn and talk, because you could turn and talk about anything. But think, pair, share is you are putting the kids into groups. You are the ones that are giving them the questions to talk about, and then they talk to each other about those guiding questions. And then a second formative assessment, exit ticket. what part of the water cycle did you observe today? And the reason I use this question is because that water activity in a bag, again, only meets 2 of those recommendations. So if you do this over the course of a couple days, this would be an exit ticket for after you did that particular inquiry-based activity. And then to make it more inclusive, you can also include a written response, or you can have the kids draw, because that's also super cool too. And like, there's a lot of kids that are talented. And some kids might not want to write and can write really well, but maybe they want to draw something. Give them that option. They'll also enjoy it more. Real world applications. See, I forgot I wrote this down. I already talked about this, but, making connections to weather patterns all over the world. So the other thing that I like to talk about is like, maybe if we are in the desert, does it rain? Are there plants growing in the desert? What's growing in the desert that needs water? Is there things growing in the desert that need water? You know, there's lots of different like questions that you can ask your students about these different weather patterns. And there's also countries in the world, especially out in like Southeast Asia, where it's very like they have a monsoon season where it's raining for like 4 months straight. And so that's another like way to like talk to your kids. Does it rain a lot here or does it rain more there? You know, that kind of thing. I should really read my slides before I start talking. Well, why does it rain in some places more than others? Yes, exactly. Predicting outcomes is also huge too. Like, why is this the way it is? Do we think this is going to happen because of this, etc.? And then summarize assessment. So you can do a project-based assessment. And this one I think is really cool because you give the students, what I like to do is you can have them create a digital presentation explaining the water cycle, or you can put them in different groups and have each group do a different part of the water cycle, and then you bring it together as one whole group project. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. If you want them to be more independent, you can have them create the digital presentation. If you want it to be a group project, then you can do what I had just suggested. And then again, using assistive technology with that too. If you have kids that are nonverbal, or if you have kids that are have trouble typing, you can use speech to text. There's lots of different things that you can do as well. And then our key takeaways here: it promotes learning when students learn by themselves. And when students learn, let me say not by themselves, because you're facilitating this, but when they learn it and they discover it on their own, just by you asking questions, that's huge, and it creates a massive retention that like any other subject or type of teaching won't do. And then it encourages curiosity and engagement. Again, we've talked about this. When students are asked questions and they want to respond, they are engaged. That's literally the definition of engagement. And then supporting all learners is huge. And then you got to make strong questions though, because if you have a random question that could have maybe more than one answer, which more than one answer is okay. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that it's more important to remember that you have to design the questions so that the point that you're trying to get across with the lesson can be answered through those questions, if that makes sense. Here are my references. And then the other thing that I was going to do is do my reflection. So this will conclude my presentation. So I'm going to stop that. And then on to the reflection. Biggest strength of my presentation. I think that I'm a very passionate person when I talk. I think that I do a really good job of pushing forward and trying to get on people to understand and grasp the concept. However, some of my weaker points is I do have ADHD, and I do really struggle sometimes with trying to maintain focus when giving a presentation. I also think it would be different if I was in front of somebody and not in a random dark room at my school. And then, let me see, a place where you could prove your presentation and delivery. I would say that, I did see a typo in there too, so I'm going to fix that. But I would say that making things not as redundant is important too, because inquiry-based learning, I mean, truthfully, it's a pretty simple concept, but how you do it can get complicated. So I think that maybe if I kind of brought that into my presentation a little bit more, I think that would have been good too. But either way, I mean, I think it was a good job. And if you have any questions or if I'm not doing this correctly, please let me know.